Welcome to Tactically Sound.
Yeah, let's jump right into Starfield because there's a couple different ways that Bethesda could improve Starfield's space travel.
Want to do it again just for fun?
Let's talk about the good, the bad, and the potential of exploring the massive space of Starfield.
So, some quick context. Matt's coming in fresh with early impressions of Starfield on PC via Game Pass. I've been chipping away at Starfield like faction by faction and doing the main quest of Starfield since it launched in 2023 on console for Series X. So we've been texting our impressions of the latest updates and measuring the current state of Starfield against the experience I've been having throughout its evolution over the past year.
There is one thing we both agree on. What's that, Spencer? Space travel needs to be better.
Yeah, so let's start with the good. So Starfield space travel isn't as bad as you think, and here's why. The ship combat is solid, ship building is robust, and the ship aesthetic is strong. So let's break that down and unpack those 3 points. So the ship combat incorporates deep and sometimes stressful real-time action with turn-based real-time pause elements, and the targeting system feels like a clunkier version of Fallout's VATS, but in space. So Matt, I was telling you this, like, get involved in the factions early because to me personally, they explain ship combat the best. As far as targeting, I don't even know if you have targeting early on, do you?
No, like I early on, it's literally just Star Fox. I'm just spinning around, shooting things. I'm like a TIE fighter, pew, 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 pew. And it's fun and it's exciting. And I think the music really helps with that. And it's just been a while since I've been in a spaceship flying around killing things. So it's fun. But yeah, that's what we were already talking about how much I was enjoying the combat, right?
Right, and then you were asking me if you could board ships, and that actually ties into the combat. Friend of the show, Nate, my good Bethesda friend since it all began with Morrowind, I was texting him asking to remind me, like, how does ship boarding work? And he said, different weapons do different types of damage or are better for longer close range, higher or lower fire rate, etc. If I'm remembering right, I think there's an EMP type weapon that you can use to disable the engines. So he loves shipbuilding for this reason. And he said you can have up to 3 different types of weapons in any one ship, so you can mix and match which weapons you want on a particular ship. And so the challenge as you get better is to disable the engines through the targeting without taking out the whole ship. And then once you disable it, that's when you can board. So
cool.
That's a little
good
bit
because yeah, I really liked how even in Assassin's Creed Black Flag, you could board enemy ships. And like, that's, Space Pirate. That's such a huge role-playing opportunity for Starfield.
Right. I love Black Flag. There's actually a Pirates of the Caribbean game on Xbox that I used to love too, that I really want to find and replay because I think it was actually published by Bethesda. Back to ship combat in Starfield. Shipbuilding was one of my favorite. Shipbuilding is so robust that your success in the air is entirely dependent on your ability to craft a great ship. And this was my weakness. I actually had to steal ships to get enough kind of understanding of how a ship could be built. And again, that points right back to those faction quest lines. So I believe it's essentially the Marines and the Pirates or SysDef.
Okay.
And so the Pirates and SysDef are integrated, and then you have the Marines. If you do both of those, you will see what I'm talking about. You'll get some ships through those quests, and you'll be able to break them down for pieces or just fly them as they are. And you'll get a feel for how much the ship building and the individual parts make up for how good the combat and the traversal feel in battle.
Right.
So then the aesthetic, Matt. Overall, like, are you seeing cool ships? Are you inspired by the potential to build?
I am inspired by the potential to build, mostly just because of the whole aesthetic and look, the visuals that I'm getting in Bethesda. I think Bethesda, they're so good at creating that sandbox feel and having tons of detail in their games and little tiny models and things to interact with, where now you're thinking like in a sandbox game like Minecraft, like what is the potential of creation for me in this game? And the game definitely looks different than other space games I've played. So yeah, it's totally inspiring me, but also I feel, there's a daunting aspect to it as well, where like, okay, how many different mechanics do you have for customization? Okay, that's a lot, or maybe it's underwhelming and not fun. I'm not quite there yet, but we'll see.
Right. I felt the same way. I mean, shipbuilding is really dense, really big. It can totally be overwhelming for me as well. Why don't you take us in the next section? Let's talk about the bad.
Yes. What doesn't work? Whether due to time or overscoping, Bethesda's main strength, Traversal, is weakened by, let's talk about three things. A clunky fast travel system. A confusing map and interface. And third, lastly, no sense of wonder when piloting your ship. So let's unpack that.
You were the one who told me clunky. So describe clunky. What do you mean by that?
So it's clunky in terms of loading screens and pseudo loading screens. Like they're trying to make you feel like you're not in a loading screen, but we all know what this is. You first get into your ship, you press a button to sit down, and then now you're pressing another button to leave into the atmosphere, but now you're just in orbit and you can float around. You might have a little battle here, but then now you're clicking on, you're opening up your menu, going into your map, and then when you're in your map, then you're finding a nearby planet that you can travel to because you can't just jump straight to the planet you want to. Then you're in orbit over there, right? And then finally, like, do you want to land? Yes, I'm landing now. It's a lot of loading and lots of interfaces and this clunkiness of just trying to get there. Like I'm shifting into all these different gears of travel just to get to where I want to go. And it just doesn't have that smooth transfer of like one map, like being on the ground into space, like we see at No Man's Sky. Like that experience. Have you ever experienced No Man's Sky, Spencer, where you're flying in your ship, leaving the atmosphere into orbit, and then eventually from orbit, flying out to your next planet or the moon right over there to land on that?
Yeah, that sounds cool. I need to play No Man's Sky so I can see what this looks like, because the only, this is probably the most involved space simulator I've played so far as in terms of getting inside of a cockpit. So for me, I need to see a better example, and it sounds like No Man's Sky gets referenced a lot in terms of Starfield. Totally. And I think you broke down why this is a clunky fast travel system. The other part of it is the maps are just confusing to me, and maybe it's because I'm not a space guy in general. I zoom out and then I zoom out again, and then I'm back outside of the menu because I zoomed out too far, and I'm understanding like, okay, what's far for my ship's capabilities? How many stops do I need to make? All of that personally confuses me when I'm just trying to get to the next planet. And I don't know how to fix that per se without totally redesigning it. And we'll get into that when we get to the potential. Before we move on though, what do you think of the sense of wonder? You mentioned that you'll be floating in space as a part of that gearing up to leave or arriving. What could they do to bring back that Bethesda sense of wonder that we feel in Oblivion? We feel it in Skyrim, Fallout 3, even Fallout 4. How do they do that with just the emptiness of space?
I think, gosh, they really have to make some areas of interest within orbit of maybe certain planets and certain solar systems, I guess. There's no area of interest other than, at least where I'm at right now, just some space battle, right? And I did have that initial sense of wonder when I first got to space. The music was kicking in. I had that space battle, and I just started flying towards my destination. And I realized, I'm not getting there. Like, this is not No Man's Sky. Oh, I have to fast travel. It's forcing me into fast travel versus, games like Fallout, Skyrim, Oblivion, where I am not forced necessarily to fast travel. And I'm getting this sense of wonder of the world because I'm experiencing everything in real time. And it's like feeding into that sense of wonder. So if I had a bit more of those areas of interest as I'm just like in orbit, like experiencing space and travel even for the first time, that maybe that sense of this game is a sandbox world. This is open now. Like technically, you don't even have to go do the story right now. You could go loot that ancient pirate bay or whatever on in orbit around this planet. Find some more pirates over there. I don't know, right? Could be. Maybe that's getting more into potential, but you see what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah. Let's jump into potential. So for me, the creation engine is doing what it's supposed to do in Starfield. I don't think the engine is the problem because I shared some screenshots in our notes and I think the screenshots look amazing. Like I think the game delivers on the aesthetic, on the feel. I think there's a difference between the graphical fidelity of the textures and the lighting. I think a lot of that is mostly strong. Now, some environments are better than others, but I think where they struggle is consistency and they struggle with art direction, like picking a lane. Because sometimes I'll be in an environment and a natural disaster or an event happens in the story where you're seeing tons of NPCs running and things are happening and you're feeling like you're in a movie and the action is there and the combat is there. That's the engine working. But then at other moments, the slower moments, I think is where Starfield suffers, where you're just in a town and there is no scripted event. And you're like, I don't know why I should care to go to these shops. Like, the world is almost there, seeing some of the billboards. Right. That's in a cyberpunk world, in a futuristic world, that's where you tell the audience what the narrative and what the underlying message of the game is. And I think they struggle big time there, where the Outer Worlds does really good. Even, for me, Starfield sits underneath Mass Effect and XCOM of this like sense of duty. And I think Mass Effect, even though I'm only, maybe 17, 20 hours into the first game, I've never played it before, but I have a very clear idea that this is like a space opera with factions, with like a big sense of, you're either dutiful or you're forgive me if I'm mistaking this, like the renegade or something. It's like Paragon and Renegade or something like that. That has a clearer space world where you could picture what that novel would look like. I think Starfield is getting close to that. And so translating that part of sense of wonder, of journeying and traveling into like the space part, I don't want to blame the engine because I think it's delivering some of that. I think some of that is figuring out what should those point of interest be. Like you mentioned, should it be that you see a big pirate bay? Like how do you show people things in space as a point of interest without, guiding them there? Or just having these little ship encounters that I don't think do enough to make me interested. So we'll get into my solution, but first let's talk about like the bones for great exploration are there if they could find ways to gamify this overworld map. So you're coming at it from, you want more of a No Man's Sky real-time exploration. And I'm kind of coming at it from a different angle. So my angle is that they maybe gamify the overworld map like games like XCOM or Fire Emblem or Banner Saga, Halcyon 6. Emphasize the management element of it. I think Mass Effect even does it a little bit too, where it's like, it's so big. Give us an aerial view from the command center. Maybe it's a module that you put in your ship. And it like all your crews, they report, okay, our outpost did this. And this actually might already be in the game when you're doing the outpost element of it. But I would love to not have to build outposts. I would love for it to be a little bit more of a tactical not getting on the boots on the ground and building all these outposts myself, but just like a simple button, like build an outpost for me. And maybe that's there, maybe that's not. But I think communicating that to a player like me who's 60 hours in, like, hey, here's a really simple way. We could build the outpost for you and you don't even have to visit them, but they'll be there and you could collect resources and you'll see pirates and quests will kind of evolve from the overworld. You could either even do ship combat where you don't personally fly the ship, but you see like an event screen. What do you think of that approach? Does that make sense in this type of game?
I think it totally does. And I think it even somewhat fits the Bethesda charm and style. You know, we were talking about how, the part of the charm of Oblivion is all those little mini games they have and skill checks, right? This could be another skill check, flying your plane long distance, your starship long distances, right? And having that sort of kind of mini game aspect. I'm already like thinking in Kingdom Hearts, you're flying in the gummy ship, a spaceship as well. And what they do to travel from world to world is they have like that overhead mini map, like in Mass Effect or whatever, where you would drive your ship to that planet, right? And they didn't have all like the tactics of like how much fuel you're using and everything like that. But just even something as simple as that could have worked really well, especially with a more mature tactical spin on things, like you were saying.
Right. I just think that would be so cool. Almost like what Fire Emblem Three Houses does with the castle, which is very Persona inspired. The final point we'll kind of address is, can they fix this with DLC? Like we were texting and you said there's an opportunity here for DLC. My thing that I would throw in is give us a ship for every DLC expansion that we will all remember as a part of the lore. That if this was to be turned into a TV show, that ship, we'd be like, oh, there's the ship. For me, it's the Expanse, the Rocinante. It's like you just hear the name of the ship over and over again, and it starts to mean something to you from a lore perspective. So I think if DLCs could make the ship feel big and expansive, like a Star Trek ship, like a Mass Effect ship, I think that would be really, really cool. And then a crew that you meet that could kind of become your new crew if you don't like the previous crew, a more serious crew, because I laugh when I see like the cowboy hat or the silly like caps. It's that lack of comic book appeal that we want, where it's like we want Doomslayer level character building and design. We want characters that you would buy the action figure of because their armor is so cool, right? We want the Boba Fett, right? We want that type of team. So could they in DLC incorporate cooler armor sets, cooler character designs, more believable action heroes? Like we're not telling bedtime stories to kids inside of the ship. Like there's this weird kind of Disneyification of the characters. Like it'll get really dark. I think you'll remember, in Constellation, there's like a kid that goes places with us. And there's a cowboy at a cowboy town. It's like, it's a little hard to believe at times. There's a charm to it, of course, and there's a Bethesda element to that quirkiness. But I think with the DLC, go serious. Like give us something really cool, really exciting for those who want to who love Halo and miss the armor and all that. What else could they add with DLC? What options are there?
Oh gosh, I mean, there's so many ideas, and we're gonna see that in the modding community for sure. We're already seeing them turn it into a Star Wars game, as much as they can, like reskinning the game, which is cool. But yeah, we're gonna see a ton of different stuff, I think, from the community, and I think that's one of the strengths of playing a Bethesda game long term is the community, really. Now, something that I would really like to see, that I just enjoy in any game I play, any RPG, is, the random encounters. And I think there's potential with releasing these new DLCs, like building on the factions and random encounters with the factions, and even like incorporating some sort of like memory of what sort of missions you've done, and to react with the script in that sort of way too. I've always enjoyed the random encounters and the silly ones we get in Skyrim and Oblivion, but just to see that in a new way in space, it would be really cool.
Yeah. Well, let's leave it there. I think we've presented our the good, the bad, and the potential for how Bethesda can improve travel in space. So let us know how we did. Share with us your thoughts, because it's new for Matt and I'm revisiting it. I'm finally getting back into it. I'm enjoying my time. I have to say, it's a lot more fun deeper in than it is at the start. The more deep you get into the quest, the better your gear gets, the better your ship gets. It does feel better, and I'm sure the updates have to do with that. So Matt, where can they follow you for your journey here? How do they keep up with Matt?
You'll keep up with me on my Instagram and as well as my YouTube. Jumby Jumbwa, JUMBY I'll see you guys there.
Dope. And yeah, if you guys like this content, subscribe to the Yeti Den, and we will see you guys next time. Later. Bye.